Peace. Welcome to the LightBulb Lessons podcast, where we build with professional leaders who share the organic life lessons. I'm your host, T.O. Clay. My mission is to leverage and extract intellectual perspective, thought-provoking conversation, and real lightbulb moment experiences to help others reflect, develop, and grow as people. These lessons are inspired by the priceless moments in life we use to connect the dots and propel ourselves forward along our journey. It's time to turn on the lamp and shine light. Let's get it.
Peace, love, and light, family. Again, we're back with another episode. I'm your host, T.O. Clay of LightBulb Lessons. I always say, you go back and look at any video, listen to any stream, I always say, my goal is to bring on the best leaders that I know. That's my journey. You know, if I set out to go across the country, if I set out to go overseas, if I'm sitting here at my house, whatever it may be, I'm always thinking about these individuals that I consider Hall of Fame leaders. And today, on this amazing day in January, very cold outside here in Georgia, I got a special gentleman with me today. And I'm gonna dive right in. As a young drill instructor, India Company, Paris Island, South Carolina, I was a senior drill instructor. So, you know, that means I'm in charge of the rest of the platoon. For my family out there that doesn't always understand the military jargon. And outside the famous 3rd Battalion squad bay, as where we house the recruits down there, there's an outside landing. And that particular landing, right across from the chow hall, as I was a young drill instructor coming up, watching some of the heavyweights before me, that was a way of like parading the platoon. They would go out there and get all the recruits up on this landing up high, and everybody walking by could see them up there, and they would do what we call popping sticks. And as a senior, I wanted to do all the little things that I saw gentlemen before me do, and there was a first sergeant leaving from the headquarters building coming towards us, and I saw the first sergeant. I continued to do what I was doing with the platoon, and as the first sergeant got up close, he looked up at me. He said, "Hey, senior drill instructor, that ain't it. Get him in the house." I said, "All right, first sergeant." He carried on. He went on inside to the building that he worked out of, and I had a choice in that moment, you know, for the young budding leaders out there, spread across the bow, wherever you are. When someone is in charge of you and they give you an order, you have a choice. But if it's embedded within you, the ideals, the moral, the expectations associated as that brother, that sisterhood, like we've shared as United States Marines, I knew once I got those recruits in the house, I wanted to drive that point home. And I told those recruits, hey, you know, straight to the point, hey, that's a first sergeant in the United States Marines. You know, I am a staff sergeant. You understand the rank structure. And when that first sergeant says, hey, we execute, and we make it happen based on that specific order. And that was that. So I'd like to open it up with that. I have an amazing gentleman here with me. The gentleman goes by the name, what we like to call him, JP Courville, retired sergeant major, gentleman that I've always looked up to, highly respect. So again, this is LightBulb Lessons, you all. Like we bringing it straight forward, straight down the pipe. So with that being said, how you feeling today, JP?
Hey, good, Tim. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good to see you. You
Thank
look
you.
great.
You do too.
I appreciate that. What a great introduction. It's just the way I wrote it for you, so I appreciate you delivering it that way.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, what a great story. I'll tell you, when I hear you tell that story, I appreciate how mature you were in that moment. But let me tell you how I replay that story now, so many years later, even though I was a first sergeant at the time. And I know you can relate to this. That's just one of those examples of a rule that I had to enforce that I didn't personally agree with, because it was a rule that was probably set at the battalion by the current battalion sergeant major at the time, a pet peeve of his. and we didn't agree
Absolutely.
with it. Therefore, we had to enforce it. But I would never enforce something like that as if it wasn't my own rule, something we're taught as a young
Yes.
NCO, right? That once you know that this is the rule or the regulation, you have to promote it, enforce it as if it were your own. I would never be, at least as an NCO and above, someone that would have made a correction like, hey, the sergeant major doesn't want you doing this, so it'd be best if you get off the
That's right.
landing. That's not the way we
Not
operate as leaders, whether it's the Marine Corps or in a
absolutely.
corporation, So I appreciate you acknowledging that. I remember that vaguely. I remember talking to you that day, but I don't remember what it was about. That's typically what comes to my mind once I hear that
Yes. I
story.
mean,
Yeah.
when you showed up to Third Battalion, your name preceded it preceded you. And having some good buddies, in the company in which you served, Mighty Mike Company. Shout out to all the Mike Company legends
Yeah.
out there.
I haven't said that in a while, by the way. Sounds pretty good. Yeah,
sounds good. Hey,
yeah, I haven't said it in
that's
a
right.
while.
That's right. But yeah, I mean, it just again, one thing I can honestly say, we as the young hats, we were proud of all the first sergeants across our battalion, man. Like we knew that, hey, we got some of the best cream in the crop here. Not to take nothing away from any of the other battalions, but if you was the first sergeant down there in that moment, it says something. So give me a little bit of background on that, man, if you don't mind. How did you end up getting those orders over the Third Battalion?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim. Obviously in the Marine Corps, they're called orders for a reason, not
Right.
requests. And
Right.
we had a great group of first sergeants, I'll be honest. Before I go into the background of that, during that time of 2006 to 2008, when I was in 3rd Battalion as a first sergeant, we had some of the top-notch first sergeants, and I was the youngest out of all of them. And so I was constantly a sponge, and I learned a lot. And specifically, Bill Sweeney and Doug Berry, who I knew very well, Reg Baker, those are the guys I was with. But Bill Sweeney and Doug Berry I had known for quite some time, so I had a history with them, and I always took something from them. They always taught me something, and we had a great rapport. But I say that to be contrite in the sense that, again, I was the youngest out of the group, and I was trying to learn. And I was very aggressive, very arrogant in certain situations. But I was respectful and humble to listen to what they had to tell me. And I give them credit. A man like Reg Baker, who was very senior to me, would come to me and tell me, hey, you're doing a great job. I like what you did. Give me an example how you operated this. And he would take a few things from me. So that was very, very impressive to me that somebody would do that. But to go back to your question, not to make a long story, I was a gunnery sergeant in 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. I was in the infantry. I had just come off 3 tours to Iraq when the first 2003 invasion through Fallujah. And I had been the acting first sergeant as a gunnery sergeant, then back to a company gunnery sergeant, which was great for me, then selected first sergeant. And when I talked to my monitor with my battalion sergeant major after I was selected, they gave me some options. And I went in after 24 hours of contemplating my decision to tell them what I wanted out of the 3 options they gave me. 24 hours later, he told me none of those were available any longer. After 24 hours, I was like, wow. So I was back to the drawing board, and he said, I'm going to send you to the drill field. We need first sergeants on the drill field. And he said, you can have your choice of where you want to go. Now, I was a drill instructor in San Diego.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So,
hey, God bless you, brother. God bless you. I didn't know.
Well, I say this with the utmost respect to San Diego. I had a great time. I cut my teeth there. I was a 3rd Battalion Mike Company recruit in San Diego. I was a 3rd Battalion Mike Company drill instructor in San Diego. But I did not want to go back to San Diego as a first sergeant if he was sending me to the drill field again as a first sergeant. So I requested Parris Island. Wow. And I tell people this all the time. I even said it at my retirement ceremony that out of all the units I'd been with, my 2 best top tier units were 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, because that's a unit I served in combat with, and then Parris Island, hands down. And because of people like you and so many drill instructors and being the first sergeant at DI school and so many people that I watched grow from a young sergeant to whatever rank they retired at or got out as, that was a great place to be for me. And I really didn't take it lightly. Those of you like yourself and so many others that knew me real well, I had learned how to appreciate the moment while I
Yeah,
was there. And I knew that there would be a time where I was the former first sergeant of my company, the former first sergeant of DI school. And so because I knew that, I was going to embrace and appreciate the time I had it.
absolutely, man.
Yeah. So that's how I got
amazing, bro. I mean, so you bleed blue all the way through then.
all the way through. And your opening comments, I really appreciate you saying, Hall of Famer and all that type of stuff. But listen, I know I wouldn't get a unanimous vote for Hall of Famer across the world in the Marine Corps. Look, I'm a realist to know that there were a lot of people that believed in what I did, what I said, how I carried myself, and what I implemented. But in reality, out of 10 Marines, I would say probably 7 believed in what I was doing, which is a great number. Then there was 1 that was on the fence and 2 that despised me pretty much everywhere I went. And those aren't bad odds, but I was a realist to understand that no matter what I did, there would be people that didn't appreciate what I was putting forth, and there would be people that did appreciate it. But as long as I was productive and efficient, and the fact that we were making ends meet and that I had a great rapport with people to be a mentor and a leader, and this is not to try to get accolades here. This is just a reality.
It's real.
Because we know we can't make everyone happy.
That's right. That's a fact, man. I mean, I think that's all of us, JP. I really do. Like,
absolutely.
I had a young dog that called me on this past Marine Corps birthday. He called and he's like, "Hey, dog, happy birthday," or whatever. And I'm like, "Okay, who is this?" But he would never say who he was. And he told me where he was at. He said he was up in Philadelphia, actually at Ton Tavern, for birthday.
Yeah.
So I was like, "No, dog,
man,
you're in the right place," and all of that good stuff. But I ended up looking online, and he said a name, but it didn't ring a bell. He just said the last name. But I ended up looking up the name, and once I saw his face, I knew exactly who he was. And the young Marine made a decision. He got a tattoo that obviously wasn't authorized at the time, and obviously was held accountable for it. And but what was said was, "Thank you, because you did the right thing." That's what he said to me. He said, "Thank you, you did the right thing." Now, obviously, we know, the standards have changed in terms of, tattoos, full sleeves, all of that good stuff. But again, there's always those situations, but bottom line, and the way I look at why we're here, man, LightBulb lessons is that's the lesson. There's I'm sure 1,000 trillion individuals out there that don't feel that swell about me or certain decisions I made or whatever. But I never saw you as that, JP. I didn't fear you. My father taught me, you don't have to fear any man. You fear God. However, I respected you.
Right.
And that's I respected you prior to what was on your collar. I respected you. I mean, one of the most physically fit Marines I've ever seen. One of the most.
I didn't hear you. What was that?
You were one of the most physically fit Marines.
I just wanted to hear it again. That's all.
But that's example.
I have humbled a lot in the last few years, by the way.
Yeah, man.
So
But that's example, bro. Like I say, man. Like it's a pleasure, to look back at those moments, man, and realize that, hey, you're human. Sometimes, man, we put this crazy huge emphasis on the individual based on what's here.
That's right.
And that's something I definitely learned as a sergeant major, that there's certain individuals that have been around for a long stinking time, and they've seen the ebb and flow of different situations in time and era. And sometimes, to see that individual say, "Hey, when I go out here in front of these Marines, hey, I don't want to be the guy that looks like I don't know what I'm talking about, but hey, that's why we're all here, because your idea, Clay, may be better than mine." So, yeah, all of that said, man, like, what was your start, man? Like, what pushed you to even join the Marine Corps?
You know, I'm proud of you, man, obviously, for what you've said, what you've accomplished, what you're doing here. And it means a lot to me to hear the things that you said. And we both have talked before this interview,
Right.
how impressive it is for leaders we've had in our life that have admitted their failures as much as their successes.
Yeah.
And we've known people that have stood on a platform and denied that they've made mistakes or poor choices, that they've always done the right thing. And we know that's fake because we're all human.
100%.
And I think that's why we relate
Yes.
and connect with people like that. And that's what's so important. So this whole thing you're doing, I think, is a wonderful platform.
Thank you.
You know, I think you're welcome. I'll be honest with you. I've lied for many years about why I joined the Marine Corps. And I think when I say lie, I mean that lightly. I would always say that I wanted to be part of something larger than myself,
Right.
as the number one priority. But to be honest with you, that's not the reason I enlisted in the Marine Corps. That's one of the reasons. But I think the top priority for me, I was born in Metairie, Louisiana. Metairie is right outside of New Orleans, and I grew up outside of Baton Rouge, and I love being from Louisiana.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a Cajun at heart.
That's right.
But I wanted my own vehicle to get out of here and establish myself as my own person.
Okay.
And I knew at an early age that university and college was not going to be my vehicle because I didn't really do well in that kind of setting during high school. So I set my eyes on the military. I wasn't sure what service yet.
Right.
The Marine Corps and the Army were the two that I was looking at. And I knew that's what I wanted to use as my platform to get out of here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, I was talking to the Marine Corps, talking to the Army. And I was leaning towards the Marine Corps. My father was very supportive of this. Of course, the rest of my family was a little bit nervous and wanted me to stay home, but they were supportive of my own choice. But when the Army recruiter found out that I was leaning towards the Marine Corps, he called my father and said, "I want to set up an appointment to meet with you face to face with your son." I can't make this up.
Wow.
He comes to my house. And of course, when he walked in with a short sleeve, Army recruiter.
Okay.
Yeah, because he knew I was leaning towards the Marine Corps.
Right.
So the Army recruiter came to try to sell to my father why I should be a soldier and not a Marine. When he got out of his car in his short sleeve shirt and a tie, I already knew I was done with the Army. Right? Because I'm not a fan of that uniform.
Right.
When he walks in, he takes a piece of paper and he draws like 25 circles and he says there are school seats for airborne. And he writes Courville in the last seat and says, "If your son joins today, I can get him a school seat in airborne." My father's kind of debating back and forth, and I'm just listening. My dad keeps telling him, "I think my son wants to be one of the few and the proud. He wants to be a Marine." So the Army recruiter was a great gentleman. He takes off his glasses, he puts them down, he goes, "Mr. Courville, I'll be honest with you. When the Marine Corps fights the Army down in Panama for force-on-force training, they kick our butt every time. But it ain't about that. It's about your son's education." Right then, I knew I was going to be a Marine. Right. And that is exactly why I took the path I had. And that same Army recruiter was following me. Even after I swore in, before I shipped, he was trying to get me to convert back to being in the Army.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing.
He admitted that out loud in front of my father and I.
Right. And
I'll never forget that.
What year did you come in, JP?
1991.
1991. Woo! I was
in high
school, man. I was in high school.
Well, I'll tell you, man, this is something that is not easy for me to admit, especially in a platform like this.
Yeah.
If it was a coffee table discussion, it's a lot easier. But I don't mind admitting I've had failures in the past. And I've continued to make bad choices or a mistake, or I've had failures, but I've had more successes than failures.
Yeah, man.
But I originally was supposed to graduate in 1990, but my sophomore year of high school, I failed. And I failed because I had friends of mine that were getting their GED and going to work to hang sheet metal, and they were making money and they were independent.
Right.
I thought that sounded like the way to go.
Right.
But my parents were very disciplined and very religious, and I knew that if I tried to quit school, they would kick my butt.
Right.
And wouldn't allow it to happen. So I had a plan that if I failed, they would just tell me, go get your GED. But I was wrong.
Right.
So I failed 10th grade. They didn't believe that. They put me in summer school and made me repeat the 10th grade.
Yeah.
So I graduated a year later based on my ridiculous thought and philosophy.
Yeah.
But I tell you that because if I would have graduated in 1990, I don't know if I would have had a successful Marine Corps career. I think that 1 year of maturity and materializing after the failure really turned out for my best interest.
It's amazing, bro. I mean, what it sounds like I'm hearing, you've used the term failure, man. Like, and we've had some discussion about this. There's people out there right now, JP, that is failing, man. There's people out there that's made mistakes. I've made them. You've made them. But you mentioned something to me in one of our other conversations. It's what everybody has heard.
Right.
How do you get back up? How do you get back up and keep charging forward, man? Can you expound on that from your own heart, what that means to you, bro?
I can. You hear quite often, time heals all wounds or time cures everything. I've come to realize and accept and live this way, that it's not time that cures everything. It's what you do with that time.
Mm.
And if you make a bad choice or if you've made a mistake, which there is a difference between the two,
right,
it's not necessarily the situation that got you into adversity. It's how you respond to the adversity that is important. And I used to give that advice to Marines all the time. I gave my own, I had to give my own advice to myself many times.
I need you to say it, JP. I need you to say that's the light bulb, please.
The light bulb. That's exactly what it is. Light bulb lessons.
That's the light bulb lesson, baby.
And it stands out. I have a few people that have heard me say this so many times that they would probably vomit right now, but right. I constantly preach this. We don't learn a lot about ourselves in comfort, even though we try to maintain comfort, a nice house, a nice job, a family. We come and go as we please. We have limited bills. We live minimalistic. But yet when you're in comfort, you don't really learn or grow. Unfortunately, adversity and challenges and problems are how we've all learned and how we've grown.
Yes.
When I've faced fear or some adverse decision that I made or adverse situation I'm in based on a poor decision I've made or a self-inflicted wound or something that wasn't my own doing, but it was given to me and now I have to deal with it. That's when I've learned the most about who I am. And obviously we know, I think every 10 years, every decade, if you look back, you think, man, I've grown this much. I've changed. Like for me right now, if I could go back to being a first sergeant when you knew me in 2006, I know that I wouldn't agree with myself now back then. There were things that I would do differently now, how I treated people, how I dealt with people, how I incorporated certain things, whether it was as a leader or a manager or even as a role model.
Right.
I've changed, and it's all growth. It's because you have failures and successes. Right. The light bulb lesson, man.
Man, bro, that's it. That's what starts to get me giddy, man. I start getting real giddy when I hear that because that's it, bro. Like I mean, we all have a life to live. I always think back to my grandmother, man. Like she's obviously passed today, but she was just that hard, stern, butt loving lady, man. She walked to church every Sunday. She would never allow anyone to give her a ride. She'd walk to the grocery store, coming back with bags, and that was her message to us. Like, hey, you're going to fall. You're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to stumble. You're going to make mistakes. But how do you stand back up and keep pushing? And that's something that is bestowed in us from the very first moment of standing on those footprints, man. Whether it's San Diego or Parris Island, those morals and those ideas are locked in, bro. So definitely, pivot to this simple question, bro. I see behind you, it says something back there. It looks like it says Appalachian Trail. I found this article of this guy I know who woke up one morning, sat down with a friend from some past and had a great conversation with that individual, and that individual rekindled a fire in this individual. And that individual, JP, is you, bro. I'm in the state of Georgia right now, for those of you that do not know. This man started on the Appalachian Trail here in Georgia. Please enlighten us on every aspect of what you were thinking in those moments leading up
Sure.
to enduring finishing out, man.
Well, so I've been retired now a decade. This is 10 years that I've been retired from the Marine Corps. Now, after I retired, I happened to get a job as a contractor working overseas in the Middle East for 7 years, and I traveled extensively around the world. I'm a big outdoorsman. I went
Yeah.
through a divorce before I retired. So
Okay.
a lot of my therapy and kind of relearning who I am was to be outdoors and be adventurous.
Yes.
So I've got a lot of stories and a lot of experiences of places I've been. I've been very fortunate, but I've also taken opportunities that were in my arena and just seized the opportunity to travel and do these things. But 2 years ago, when I was working overseas, a bunch of the departments that of the company I worked with and for were closed down due to COVID. And I happened to be in one of those departments. So we were let go. So for the next 2 years, I literally have traveled and lived like a nomad all around the world and done so many adventurous experiences. And I've been very fortunate. Again, I've used that word blessing, fortunate, and it's true. So I came back to the US and I decided that I wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. It's a 6 month journey. It's 2,194 miles. Yes, and I didn't stutter. 2,194 miles from Georgia to Maine on foot, 14 states. And I'll tell you, Tim, when I retired on June 6th of 2013. That was D-Day, right? The anniversary of D-Day. And I tied that into my speech, right? Talking about adversity.
Yes.
Go figure. And one of the things that I said, and I tried to live this way the last decade, and I think I have, is I said, today ends my time on active duty, but not my time being active. And that's how I've lived the last 10 years. And so this Appalachian Trail journey was just that, man. It was an epic adventure. It was challenging physically. I was in all the elements. There was miserable moments. There were happy, exciting moments. And it was like going back in time, literally like a cowboy in the Wild West traveling on a journey. And I started March 27th last year and finished September 27th of 2022.
Golly, man.
And it was everything I hoped it would be and more.
Man, hey, that right there, dog, definitely deserves a hand, bro. Like
Appreciate it.
That's huge, man. Like
Thank you.
I mean, the one key word that jumps out to me, man, is nature, bro. Like I'm big on that, JP. I'm really big on being in tune with the spirit realm. I love nature, because again, man, that refreshing aspect of sometimes just being able to sit outside, man. Like, we spend a lot of time outside as Marines, man. I look back at some of them photos and man, I was as dark as this freaking book right here, man. And it was just like, wow, dog. I mean, there's this picture me shaking some recruit's hand that, kind of went viral throughout the Marine Corps and a lot of the pamphlets. Recruiters, once they realized that it was me when I was here as a sergeant major, they like that. They said this is you, sergeant major, but that's not you. He's too dark. And I'm like, hey, idiot, like, I've lived in the sun out there every day, but that nature, man, that's what I think, man. Like you being out there by yourself, like you said, just that therapeutic aspect. I know reading the article, you said that you had a pistol with you, but then you followed up by saying, but truth be told, I really didn't need it.
That's right.
And then you carried on to saying some of the animals that you saw, and you saw bears specifically, one or two.
Seven black bear encounters.
Was that
seven
in the North Carolina area, or was that just stretched all the way out through?
No, so they're black bear indigenous to every state on the Appalachian Trail, but I ran into bear in 5 in Virginia, 1 in New Jersey, and 1 in Vermont, I believe. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was the help along the way, man? I know you had talked about it a little bit in the article, but for those who haven't read it, like what's your biggest takeaways from just because I have to say this, man. We did a servant leadership, panel you know, a few of our good buddies on there, uh, and I pulled up a picture of Terry Fox. Uh, Terry Fox was an amputee back in you know, the '80s, and he made the trek from, you know, one side of the country to the other side.
Amazing.
And I remember seeing that documentary as a young kid and how that inspired me, man. But the help that he had along the way, man. I know Dick Gregory did it too. I didn't know that Dick Gregory had did it, the comedian, but he did it too. So I guess that's my question, man. Like, what were some of those big takeaways, you know, with people you met along the way, man?
Yeah, everyone's experience can be completely different. I did mine mainly solo. I was on my own. Now, when I say that, I met people along the way, had a lot of good friends that I met. But when it came to camping every night, so every 7 to 10 days, I would get off the trail in a small town and get a hostel or a hotel room, get cleaned up, and take a day off. But for
Okay.
7 to 10 days, I roughly was like camping. I would solo camp or cowboy camp. You do have the
Mhm.
opportunity to be at a shelter and camp around a shelter. And what that means is you'd be around other hikers like in a community at night and people would talk
Right,
and make
right.
friends. I rarely to almost did not do that. I loved being alone. I felt the solitude. Nature is so healthy. It it heals so many things, and
Hmm.
that's what I enjoyed the most about it. But I met some extraordinary people, man. I met people that were so young, like 20 and 21 out of college. I
Right.
met a 25-year-old girl or lady who was a physical therapist. After college, she was working and she decided to move back east from out west. And she said, I'm going to hike the
Hmm.
Appalachian Trail first, then start my career over. And she had never backpacked before. And she just said, I'm going to do it. So, people like you and I had decades of experience of dealing with issues and adversity and camping and tragedy and motivation
Right.
and inspiration that helped me along the way. She did not. So she's figuring it out as long as she went, on the trail. Then I met people that were in their 70s that were fully retired, 75.
Mm.
And I met an 80-year-old man. I don't know if he finished the entire trail, but he was definitely hiking the majority of it. He hiked all of Pennsylvania. I met him in Pennsylvania, 80 years old, and he gave me some profound advice. I helped him up after we were talking one day, very frail man. And he said, so I turned 50 on the trail, right? 2022 was when I turned 50. And
Mm.
he said, do you know the difference between 50 and 51? I was like, no, sir. He said, nothing. He goes, do you know what the difference between 80 and 81 is? He's like, death, like that. And he said, I worked my entire life to ensure I had people around me to grow old with, and I've outlived everyone. Now I'm alone. Man, that hit me like a ton of bricks, man.
Yeah, I bet, man.
Yes, but
I,
you could tell that he knew that's the cards he had been dealt. And even though he was upset and lonely, there was something joyful about him. And he
yeah.
brought, like, I wasn't really complaining anyway, but that really made me go, I'm not going to complain. And I ended up getting hurt pretty severely on the trail. Thank goodness it wasn't something that kept me from continuing, but I had to take 7 days off and I snapped my ankle pretty bad and my arm on this bad fall on these rocks and these wet rocks and these boulders. I mean, it was horrible. My ankle swelled up really bad. Disappear. There we go.
No, I still see
Okay.
you. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
We're
It,
good.
it glitched on my end, but that was definitely a light bulb lesson, and
Yeah, man.
I've told this to, I'm sure you have, like your children. Even though we think we've seen it all, like at 50 and then in your 40s, you think you've seen it all, man. I'm never surprised. We always see something that we don't expect. And even though we've learned a lot, here's a guy telling me that one thing you haven't prepared for or you haven't dealt with yet is losing people you love and you outlived them. And how do you deal with that? And man, that was profound to me.
That's powerful, man. I mean, that just, I mean, 70 years old, man. I'm
80.
I'm
He was 80.
48. Yeah, I mean, even such. I mean, that's, but again, I think that's that key to life, man. That key to life is continue to push forward.
Right.
You know, I can honestly say too. I tell my wife this, JP. You might think I'm crazy, man, but it's just my thinking, bro. And the older I get, the more I really truly appreciate what is happening in the present moment.
Yes.
The present, bro. Like
100%.
I hear people talk about it. Matter of fact, I heard a lady this morning talking about she stopped her busy day and she played some games with her daughter, and she was just like, and that's the first time that I've been present in the moment in a long time.
That's a powerful feeling.
Yeah, man, and that's that just kind of that aura comes to think when I think of an 80-year-old out there on that trail still pushing forward, putting one foot in front of the other.
I met a 70, I think he was 72-year-old at a campsite one night at a waterfall, and he had a eagle globe and anchor on his forearm. And so I immediately started talking to him, and he had been a pilot, served 8 years and got out. Then he was in law enforcement and retired. And he's 72, 73, something like that. And even though he had spent 8 years in the Marine Corps and he was old enough to be my dad, when he found out after we talked a while, I don't just tell everybody I'm a retired sergeant major. I told him I was a Marine and retired. But once we started kind of getting to know each other, he asked me what rank. Yeah. Once I told him I was a sergeant major, he's 73. He wouldn't stop calling me sergeant major in the middle of the woods. And I got this big beard. I look like a homeless man. Yeah. I found that so polite and intriguing and respectful. And it was just a lot of fun to get to know this guy.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. I'm kind of the same way, JP, man. Like a lot of times I like the thrill of someone not knowing, and whether I'm in the DMV, the grocery store, whatever, and I'll see somebody's, the representation, eagle globe and anchor or a tat, like you said. My wife, she's gonna stop everybody. Like hey, you a Marine? Yeah, me and my husband, we're Marines, and then we get to talking, and it just goes where it goes. But typically, if I'm alone, sometimes I do. If it's older guys, I love having conversations with the elder gentlemen, the Vietnam era type cats, man, because man, they I ask them like, hey, man, how long did you serve, sir? I only did 4 years or 8 years or whatever. What rank were you? Oh, I was a corporal. But the pride they have in talking about serving, it's not even so much for them about rank. It's more so, man, I served. I'm a Marine. Like, and when I go to the VA, same thing, man. I sit down at that VA and, obviously here in Georgia, you got a lot of Army, soldiers, which that's cool. But every so often you see that Marine come through there, good, man. And when that Marine comes through, it's like, rock. It's a different story. Hey, yeah, simplify. A lot of them will just say simplify. Moving.
I tell you what, with what you're saying, our generation, right? Generation X. And I don't like to go down this path a lot of times. However, one thing I've kind of noticed is our generation and prior to, we respected our elders and those that came and went before us. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We say that quite a bit. What I've seen to have noticed, especially via social media, and maybe not so much people I've known, but in the new generation, the younger crowd, they view people that are older as an iPhone that needs to be replaced. Like, right?
Right.
So instead of giving appreciation to the older model, they need an upgrade to the new and current technology, and they look at us different. Here's my example. I see it all the time. Like, okay, if you watch interviews with football players 30 years ago in the NFL or even in college, they referred to their coach as coach. Now, when you watch, they refer to their coach by first name or brother. Right. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, right? Because to each his own. I'm comfortable with anybody doing that. But that's where I see the change. It's almost like everybody is on the same level as opposed to giving props to a coach who's put in the year and the time, the effort, and has marinated for a few extra decades than you.
Absolutely, man. And that I'm glad you mentioned that, JP, because my vision of LightBulb lessons is, we talk about it can't end, man, the day we leave that uniform. It is just too much leadership experience tapped into one, and that's how I love to look at it. I look at it from that standpoint, JP. I look at it from, hey, man, these gentlemen and ladies are Hall of Fame leaders, man. Like they've led at what we call the tip of the spear, bro. Like I get it, man. I don't take nothing away from anybody out there because I believe there's leadership in every aspect, and my favorite always is going to be Vince Lombardi. And Vince Lombardi said, hey, leaders are not born. They're made through, hard effort and sharpening that blade. And that's what I think of with LightBulb Lessons, man. Like these moments, just being here to be able to share with you, brother. I mean, you're down in Louisiana, man. I mean, I'm here in Georgia, but here we are on LightBulb Lessons. Not about you, not about me, just sharing. And the experience that you have, bro, like as I've said with many of my other brothers that's been on here, man, like it is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. And I consider you gentlemen Hall of Fame leaders. I've always said, man, I wish the Marine Corps had, I know we got the Hall of Heroes at DI school. But man, like some of you gentlemen need to be on that bulkhead, all across the Marine Corps. Like, hey, these are gold jacket people. Doesn't matter if they're male, female, Hispanic, African American. It doesn't matter, dog. You wore the cloth. You rate, and that's what I see with the NFL and the NBA. And I look, Bill Russell was, he's iconic to the day he died.
Recently too, right? Was it last year?
Yeah, recently. Yeah. Absolutely. So again, man, we're retired. But at the end of the day, man, if it takes us for this exchange to say, hey, man, this guy right here, which I want to segment to in terms of leadership, man, we're about 41 minutes in. What's your definition of leadership, JP? In your own words, what is leadership to you?
Sometimes definitions are difficult. More example, but leadership is simply just influence of people to a common goal and accomplish that. One of my, I hate to share a pet peeve, but one thing that used to irritate me in the Marine Corps at certain ranks that we obtain on, let's say, email or in a meeting, when they would call everybody a leader on an email, like leaders, and they would put all the sergeants major or all the first sergeants or whatever rank in that group. And I would think to myself, position gives you the authority to lead, but if you're not influencing people, then you aren't a leader. And so if you obtain the rank of, let's say, sergeant major, and you have the office of the sergeant major, I personally and professionally don't believe that makes you a leader. Now, you've done things to get there where you might have exuded leadership skills and talents. But again, if you're not influencing people to a common goal, and I've been a failure at this myself. I'm not trying to stand up here and say that I was always the influence, but I've failed myself. There's been times where I had people that didn't believe in what I was selling, and they didn't come to a common goal. And I felt like my influence had been diluted. And then I had to change my style. It's that old adage that we learned when we were young that, you think being a hammer is going to get the mission accomplished, but not every problem is a tool. You have to have different types of tools in your toolbox to deal with that problem. I don't think I even learned that till I was a sergeant with time and grade before my eyes opened to that. Otherwise, it was always a hammer, hammer, hammer. But the definition for me is the ability to influence others to a common goal. It's that simple for me. And, what you said, man, I appreciate with the gold jacket, the Hall of Famer thing, and to be as humble as I can be, I know that I was an effective leader and that I influenced a great deal of Marines, because otherwise, 10 years removed from the Marine Corps, I still talk to a lot of Marines about advice, mentorship, you name it. And it goes beyond the Marine Corps, right? But I'm not cocky enough or arrogant enough to think that I was a Hall of Famer. There's a lot of people that I'm the sum total of so many people I've met, or everyone I've met in my life, that have turned me into who I am. But I do appreciate the sentiment. And the last thing I will say on this, you talked about Vince Lombardi. Have you watched the new Coach Prime, Amazon Prime video that they have with Deion Sanders following him through Jackson State? Oh man, the key notes of leadership and trying to establish a culture and holding people accountable. And then now if you go on social media with Colorado State, I just watched something yesterday where he had everyone in a room and he was telling them how they were going to operate on campus, not on the football field, how they were going to act on campus as leaders. Man,
yes,
what an incredible man. We're watching this unfold in front of our eyes from a man who was a player that everyone aspired to be to who he is now. And his age and his experience are just kind of completely unfolding in front of our eyes to make a better system. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're spot on, man. I mean, it's not too many people that you can put in a category as prime.
That's right.
You just can't, man. You know, I was blessed to see him here with Eric Thomas last year. He came with Eric Thomas at one of his events here in Atlanta, and it was right around the time when there was some back and forth with him and Nick Saban, and that was like the aura in the room. Like, okay, what is he going to say about Nick Saban? And man, he kept it.
Yes, he did.
Professional, bro. Like he kept it professional. He was like, man, Nick Saban will go down as arguably top 3 best coaches to ever live in this game we know is football. And he said, but sometimes, hey, dogs sniff each other's butts as what we do. And then he went into his prime time vibe, but he talked a lot about God too, man. He talked a lot about God in his life, and he also talked about he got very vulnerable. He said that prime time didn't know who Deion Sanders was. And he also said that Deion Sanders obviously didn't know who prime time was. And he talked about that alter ego, how as he developed, as you mentioned earlier, JP, as he developed over time, he realized that he had to take these two aspects of himself that were not looking at each other and blend those together and become prime. Amazing gentleman, man. But you're right. Spot on with the leadership aspect of it too, man. And you're right.
No, I think we can all relate to what you just described with Deion Sanders and how he had to merge those two together. I said this the other day, and I say it often to friends of mine. At 25, I think I'd been in the Marine Corps 6 or going on 7 years, which is a long time, my second duty station. And that's when I can look back and realize that I finally came into my own and I was comfortable in my own skin. That's why I was probably 25 going on 26. So it kind of relates to what you were saying about Deion. Now, being a gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, in 1989, I was in high school when he got drafted. And I had to watch him play the Saints twice a year in Atlanta, and it was not fun.
Do you classify? Are you a Saints fan?
What an insult! Yes.
I mean, that's rhetorical. What do you think about Coach Payton, man? Like, do you think Coach Payton was that right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, the way he established the culture and how he handled that draft and the free agency of signing Drew Brees. Anyone that's, I don't know, 10 or 15 years younger than I am, regardless if you're from Louisiana or not, the New Orleans Saints were established in 1967. And until 2006, we had one playoff win and maybe 2 or 3 appearances that happened later in the 80s under Jim Mora. We were like the Cleveland Browns or New York Jets of the 70s and 80s. And it was an embarrassing place to be and root for. However, the city and the state still cheer for our team. We would be upset. And look, I moved away, not to go into too many details of this. We moved away when I was in elementary school to Houston, Texas for a few years when my dad was in construction, and then back to Louisiana. And this is awesome because when I was a kid and we moved to Houston, my favorite running back to this day of all time is Earl Campbell, the Tyler Rose. And he played for the Oilers at the time. Bum Phillips was the coach. Kenny Stabler had come from the Raiders to Houston. when my dad moved us back to Louisiana, all three of them went from the Oilers to the Saints. So Earl Campbell, Kenny Stabler, and Bum Phillips were with the New Orleans Saints when we moved back. It felt like they followed us or we followed them. And that was a really unique situation. But, I mean, if I'm lying, I'm dying. I swear on the Bible. Earl Campbell is my favorite running back of all time. Number 34 for Houston, 35 for the Saints.
Hey, we talked about personal development earlier. And I mentioned the name Eric Thomas. So Earl Campbell's son, Earl Campbell Jr., you know, I had the privilege of meeting him. And and a gentleman, you know, shout out to Earl Campbell Jr. Shout out to Earl Campbell. Shout out to E.T. The whole Game Changers team out there, man. It's just amazing because Earl Campbell Jr., you know, he wrote a book. He's got a book out right now, and I tell anybody out there, man, go check it out because he expounds a lot on his life as the child of such a Hall of Fame gentleman known as his father, Earl Campbell. And, you know, the gentleman that helped him write that book, shout out to Kelly Cole, man. Kelly Cole, that's what he's doing. It's called Books for Athletes. And he's getting out and about, and, you know, a lot of athletes that are no longer playing or whatnot, telling their stories, man. And so to hear you say that, man, that's huge. You know, I remember Earl Campbell, and he's in my top four. I'll put him in my top four. You know, I love Warren Moon as well. But for me, it's gonna be Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders is to me the greatest running back.
Phenomenal. Him, Dion, and I think Troy Aikman, 89 draft class. And there's somebody else I'm missing, maybe Derek Thomas. I can't remember right now, but 89 draft class, I think, is by far the best draft class considered in NFL history with all those names that came out of that draft class. And I think Earl Campbell's son, I had seen him on an interview. I might be a little off on this, but he said that he was at an event where Jim Brown was being asked questions. And Jim Brown said that the number 1, 2, 3, 4 running back of all time is, I think he said, Jim Brown himself, Walter Payton, Earl Campbell, and then you can stack whoever you want after that.
I can't argue that one. I mean, for me, if I say Barry Sanders is because I've had a lot more time to really, especially now, you see it on the internet, they break it down to the finite. But then when you go and you look at Jim Brown, JP, you go and you look at the sweetness, Walter Payton, you go and you look at Earl Campbell, and you see the difference in their style of running back. Oh, man. Dog,
when you see Earl Campbell pile drive, you go watch his highlights. There's one famous play where he's playing, I think they were the Los Angeles Rams at the time, and he lowers his helmet, hits the dude in the chest, and knocks him down and rolls down the lane, and he's got 4 defenders ripping his jersey off of him. You know, the difference though back then, they didn't hold the ball like they do today because you have too many defenders chopping the ball. They palmed the ball too much back then where they easily could get it taken away today. But let me go back to Barry Sanders. I think this is an important thing. So I'm not that big of a man. Yes. I mean, I train myself and work out and transition my physique at an early age because I wanted more confidence, like a body of armor. But I'm only 5'10", maybe 5'9" now as I've aged. Barry Sanders, and I'm going to throw Drew Brees in this category, and even Russell Wilson, even though Russell Wilson didn't perform that well this year. I love anyone that is undersized for a position that they play and they overachieve. And those three specifically, at their size, man, they just broke boundaries and exceeded expectations. And that makes someone like me look at that and go, wow, you know, anyone can do more than what's expected. Your size and your height, your weight, you know, is not going to, you know, determine who you are.
Right. That's true, man. That's an amazing core of gentlemen you just said. And while I was at Chapel Hill, working as an MOY with JJ
Oh
Ragland.
man, I know Rags real well. I got some stories of Ragland.
Yeah. Yes, old JJ Ragland, man. And I was down at NC State visiting him. We got some training down there, and he took me to the Wolfpack Lounge, right across from where the all TC students housed, and it's packed in there. Students everywhere. It's rush hour. Everybody's in there getting Chick-fil-A, whatever. And we get our chow, JP, and we sit down at the table. Rags puts his chow down and he leaves. This guy walks up and says, "Hey, excuse me, do you mind if I sit here with you gentlemen?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, sure." It's a big table. Sure, yeah, go ahead. So I get up and I go get my drink, and I told JJ Rag, I said, "Hey, man, that dude asked could he sit at the table with us. We were in uniform." He said, "Man, you know who that is?" I said, "Nah, dog. He just said he wanted to sit down and eat at our table." He said, "Dog, that's Russell Wilson, dog. That's the quarterback for NC State." And man, when I tell you, JP, we went to sit down with this guy. Like you said, man, horrible season. Right. Hey, sometimes we have them. Sometimes it snows. Sometimes it rains. I get it. But man, when I tell you, man, a light bulb lesson, great experience, great moment was sitting at that table with Russell Wilson. And at the time, they had just played Chapel Hill. He flamed Chapel Hill. And I remember just like, man, who is this quarterback guy? He transferred from Wisconsin or is about to transfer to Wisconsin, whichever way he went. I know he transferred and ended up playing for Wisconsin too, I think. But he torched UNC. And just, all in all, man, he told us out of his own mouth, had it not been for football, I would have joined the United States Marine Corps. He said that out of his mouth. And obviously, we're like, man, that's amazing. So, just again, when I look at the parallels, JP, of these sports greats,
no doubt about it.
There's a lot of us too, bro.
Yeah. I didn't know a lot of detail about football, man, when I graduated high school, even though I had played in junior high and some of high school, like freshman year. I was a very shy kid, so I really wasn't in my comfort zone at that point. But when I joined the Marine Corps and I was in the infantry, a lot of our commanders would teach us football tactics to relate to infantry squad and platoon tactics. And once I started understanding those concepts, I would watch football differently. When there was a play action pass, I would be like, hey, there was a deception here and a frontal attack and having someone with fire support. And I would connect it all to maneuver warfare. And once I started doing that, I started learning and enjoying football even more and became more of a fan because let's face it, when I played, I knew we had to get the ball to the end zone. If I blocked, sometimes I would block in the wrong direction because I was just trying to push the guy out of the way and I pushed him into the running back. All these things that I really didn't understand.
Yes.
But look, man, back to Ragland. I know he would back this story up. So when I was a contractor in the United Arab Emirates, right, we had Marines that would come out there for 1 year and do a tour for 1 year. And Ragland was on that tour and we had Marines out there. And like I mentioned earlier, I traveled a lot and went outdoors quite a bit. And they had asked me if they could come out on one of my weekend adventures. So I took them into the country of Oman, which I frequently went and camped and hiked and did a lot of adventures out there. It was so different than the United Arab Emirates. Anyway, long story short, kind of a leadership lesson. Right. We all sat around a campfire one night and I started the conversation. I said, let's go around the table or not the table, around the fire pit and tell me something about you that none of us know. And there was like 6 or 7 of us out there. I was the only civilian. They were all Marines, active duty. And man, we learned so much about each other, including with Ragland, man. There were things that we all shared that the next time we saw each other at work, we all had a different appreciation just from a weekend together, from sharing those moments. And I learned that as an active duty Marine, when you'd have like a guided discussion or you'd have a one-on-one with someone or you'd have a group discussion with a few people that you were trying to get to understand who they were and their being, Yeah.
Right. Man, JJ Rag, man. I've had a few episodes. Yes. Few episodes where his name comes up.
I will say though, a few of the Marines that I took on that trip tapped out on a hike I took them on, so I had to change the plan. I won't mention names, but
okay, yeah. Hey, we'll let that stay out there, bro.
Raglan backed me up on that
They know
story.
who they are, you know. Yeah, they know who they are.